All right, so all right, so let's start. And I want to talk to you guys just real quick. Um, Dr. Schultz and Dr. Rutherford and myself have been talking about getting the CEC student organization back up and running. I know some of you are interested. So here's the thing. We're going to have soon, we're going to have a all big eat pizza kind of kickoff thing going. But here's what the benefit is. If we only have 5 to 10 students, it's would cost you to become a member is $35. The regular price is 40. So then that's by group membership, it becomes cheaper. It's a really good, that's a good deal. If we have more than 16 members, it gets even less. So that's the thing. So start talking it up to your friends. They don't have to be a special education person. They just need to be interested in working with students. So because everything we do benefits all kids. The great thing about this is that you get the benefits of the package. Remember, you get your $1 million student educator professional liability insurance as part of it. You get access to the CEC journals, Exceptional Children and Teaching Exceptional Children. You get access to all the webinars and trainings that are free, and access to community to engage in asking questions and stuff like that. So does that sound like something you guys might be interested in doing? Okay, and so here's the other thing. I want you to be thinking about this, is that we'll need officers for the organization to get going. We'll need a person that would be president, a person that would be president-elect, the next president. I believe we need a secretary, a treasurer, and I don't know if we need a vice president or not. We'll look at I have to look at that. So there could be 5 people. You need at least 10 people. That includes Dr. Rutherford and Dr. Schultz and myself, since we're already members. So 7 students would need to join to make the group an active group. So think about this. I'll be getting information out, or Dr. Schultz will be getting information out. We'll get this, or Dr. Rutherford, and we'll get it going, because I think it'd be a great service and we can start getting some things going to, because let me tell you, this was a very active a group, and I'd like to see it active again. And we can't let a little virus hold us back, right? So there you go. Okay. So that is what I'm, that's a quick overview of that. So we'll be talking more about that later. Today, we're moving into looking at severe behaviors today. And we're moving into this book. I think that's your book. This is mine. So your book like this, it's a real thin book. And we're going to start focusing on how to conduct a functional behavior assessment and make it understandable and work that through. Okay. So today, before we do that, we're going to walk through managing severe behavior in the classroom. How do we do that? And understanding the cycle of severe behavior. So we're going to walk through that today. All right, so remember, with behaviors, we can follow the tiered process. Universal is school-wide and classroom-wide, selected as small group and classroom groups, and then targeted is individual. And then if those don't work, then we can go into the more specific things like functional behavior assessments and on, et cetera, et cetera. And there's a lot of different things we can do. So again, the three-tiered model, multi-systems of support is really a powerful tool for us to get students to engage appropriate in the classroom setting. Now, I do want to let you know, I'll ask a question for you. Whose behavior can you manage as a teacher? Whose behavior can you manage as a teacher?
Your own behavior.
Your own behavior. Very good. You win the atta girl. There you go. Absolutely. That's it. You know, you'll have influence over the kids in your classroom, but you're not going to manage theirs. Your job is to help them manage their own. That's what your job is to do. So that if we could think of that, that's a really powerful tool. Is that takes that onus off of you guys saying that I've got to manage this group of 20 kids and make sure they're. No, you provide them. It's the horse, lead the horse to water and make them drink. You know, you can't do it. So you can influence, but you can't manage. So that's important to remember. So take that off of your plate. Boy, I mean, shoo, you don't want to be Atlas with that big old world on your back, do you? Or trying to push a boulder up. Managing kids' behavior is trying to push a wet noodle with your finger. Have you done that? Have you tried pushing a wet noodle with your finger and getting it across? You can't do it. Another analogy I use is trying to nail Jello to the wall. Doesn't work. Can't do it. So that's the thing, is that we're going to teach you, I'm going to continue to try to work on helping you influence kids to manage their own behaviors, but it's really up to them on how they do that through rules and strategies, etc. We'll get there. So we're going to look at two things today. We're going to look at understanding the chains of severe problem behaviors, and we're going to understand strategies for intervening in those problem behaviors at certain points. All right, so some key assumptions for us to think through. All behaviors have identifiable reason for why a student is engaging in those behaviors. Remember, we talked about the function of the behavior and the purpose of that behavior. There are some common features across ages and disabilities. And we're going to look at two distinct things. One's a very severe, a student with very severe disabilities and how they go through the process. And then it's a student that has just a behavior problem and doesn't have the severe issues like not being able to communicate. There is usually an element in the behavior chain where you can intervene to cause that behavior chain to be different in the future. You need to think about targeting all settings where the student engages in those behaviors. You need to know that some students will need some extra support and services. And some students, you're even going to need to coordinate outside services, like if they're getting counseling and those kind of things. You need to intervene as early as possible in the behavioral chain, because the earlier you intervene, the easier it's going to be to fix it and help them behave appropriately. All of the stuff that you do is part of the positive behavior support system. And so that's the thing, is that we need to think about proactive ways to deal with kids, not reactive ways. That's why I hate prison. I hate all those things. Those are reactive ways. Once a kid's in prison or sent to ISS, it's almost like, okay, what's the deal? You're done. And it's not a good thing. It doesn't rehabilitate the child or the individual. You're punishing. And remember, punishment without a positive behavioral support system is worthless. It doesn't do a thing. Always have to pair punishment, if you're going to use a punisher, with a positive rehabilitative process. So that's always part of that. Okay. So we're going to look at this, and if you look at your handout, you'll see you have the next several slides on the handout. So you'll see Michael, etc. And we'll walk through all these. And then I want you to work together to identify some characteristics that are similar. Okay. Example 1. This is Michael. Michael is a student that doesn't have, he might have a learning disability or something, but he doesn't have any physical disabilities. So we have Michael, during independent work in math, students are expected to complete problems that were assigned in the previous class. One student, Michael, is sitting slouched in his seat. See if you can see this. He's sitting there, slouched down, feet stretched out, head down, staring at the floor, and looking like he could bite the heads off nails, right? So he's not in a happy mood, right? He doesn't like math. He probably has a learning disability in math, maybe. I don't know. The successive interactions are presented along with a brief description of the teacher and student's behavior in the next slide. So let's take a look at that. So here's the teacher. He says, Michael, it is time to get started with your math. And Michael says, sitting in his seat, you can probably hear him say, a lot of contempt in his voice. What? The math he didn't finish this morning. He says, I did finish it, you idiot. Kind of that's the attitude. Well, let me see your work, please. Michael leans back and kind of rolls his eyes and says, and hands her the paper and kind of flops it onto the desk. And says, good for you. You've done 4 problems, but you need to do 10. And he says, when did we have to do 10? And she says, I announced that at the beginning of class yesterday. And he says, I don't remember that. Michael, look at the board, see under assignment 1 through 10. Well, that's the first time I've seen it. Look, Michael, this has gone too far enough. You need to finish the rest of your assignment, so please get on with it. No way. I'm done. And he just kind of like lets you know you're done. Then the teacher says, okay, here's your choice. Either you do the math now or you'll have to do it in ISS, in school suspension. And Michael says, it drops the F-bomb on the teacher. Did you see this happening? Yeah. That's verbal abuse, Michael. I will now do an office referral. So now he's getting deeper in trouble. He's digging himself into a big, deep hole. He throws a book across the room. All right, it's to the office. And the teacher kind of engages the student in a physical by nudging the student on the elbow. The student then swings the arm in the direction of the teacher and makes contact with the teacher's arm. The teacher then follows emergency procedures and calls for help, resulting in the student being escorted to the office. So it gets into a physical altercation. All right, can you see that happening? We'll talk about what happened. I want you to talk in your groups about how this got out of control. Now we're going to look at Jason. Jason is a severe person with a severe disability. He has an IQ that can barely be measured, maybe in the 20s or 30s or 40s, so you know he's really, really low. He has a cleft palate. Constantly he is regurgitating, and that's kind of, a regurgitation is where he's kind of throwing up in his mouth a little bit, belching and doing all that. And he pulls his hair. And the regurgitations are good because it's kind of like acid reflux. It destroys the pathway in your throat and all that, so it's not good. He pulls his hair. So his arms were frequently in splints because of the stuff he does. So think about this. What we tend to use for splints is not wooden things. It's like these big tubes that paper come in, and we might put it on their arms so they can't hit themselves in the head. So if you have these things on your arms, you can't hit yourself in the head. So we would use those in the very severe classrooms for these severe kids. He has no verbal language and has received several diagnoses, the most recent being severe autism. Presently, he is required to complete a match sample task in a voc ed center. He has a picture and he has to match an item to the picture. So it's not a major deal task, but it's a vocational task. You can teach kids how to count if they don't have any capability of that by having a box and have 10 spots and they put 10 things in there, that's 10, right? Okay. And if you have 10 nuts and bolts, the pairs that go into a vocational thing, that's kind of a vocational activity. Not a work activity. Teaching them a vocational thing. Okay. So now we're going to look at this, the same similar process with Jason and his teacher. Teacher prompts Jason to pick up one of the items. So it might be a physical prompt by touching the arm, or might be tapping the table next to the item. Jason rolls his head, begins to regurgitate. So he's in a wheelchair and he's just kind of not engaging with the activity. So the teacher actually hands him the item and nudges his elbow. Jason slowly takes the item and begins to twirl it in his fingers and kind of mess with it. The teacher taps the tray where the item is to be placed, and Jason just drops it on the table. The teacher then taps the table near the item, and Jason turns his palm and slaps his face, so he starts engaging in self-destructive behavior. The teacher holds his hand and then taps the table and slowly lets his hand go. And Jason turns his hand, slaps his face, and begins to start pulling his hair. So the teacher then places the splints on his arms and tries to calm him down. Jason starts to roll his head and regurgitates continuously louder than earlier. So belching very loudly and etc. So what you are to do in groups of, you can be more than 2 or 3, But in groups, I want you to identify what similarities you see between these behaviors and these interactions with the teachers. And I want you to kind of talk about how the severe disabled child and the student with the behavior problems, there's some similarities and stuff. So talk to your groups, get groups to talk, you couple groups maybe, or 3 groups, but at least 2 groups. While you're in your groups, talk about what was the involvement of the student with the task, what were the signs of agitation, what were the presence of successive interactions, and what were the signs of escalating behaviors. So identify those. Let's take 10 minutes. I think that'll be pretty.
But telling the student something and not follow it isn't going to. It was already kind of using
Oh, yes.
with the
That's my. Yeah. Because it'll be like that. Sometimes if they do it, boom, and then you have to do it again.
Oh, I thought you were. And example one,
That's a long.
and frustration with yourself.
successive mean like successful? Oh,
No, successive means one after the other.
oh.
So not successive. Successive. It's like.
Still trying to figure out.
Three wins. Three wins. It's good. It's fun. I had a root canal. Now
Yeah.
Oh, right. Right, right.
And it took them all. Most of the time,
I had a root.
And one. I would have probably
Yeah.
addressed it. See how far we can get, you know, take wherever I can get.
Yeah.
Hey, Dr. Cabot, what is that book that we did?
Oh, yeah.
It's pressure in the voice. Very.
Just, I mean, it's just a shot. Burns. Oh, yeah. It's crazy. It's like you're laying there or something. Light in the room. Yeah, and the surgery. This place is freezing cold. And all of a sudden, you wake up
Right.
Oh, that's what you. Oh, yeah.
It'll be fine. Thank you.
Is there anything that takes like a beat on it?
Never does that.
An hour. You have to do 20 minutes. So it's like you have to have. And like it's how long it takes to heat up water for the swimming. And then the second exercise was just like working out how long. And then the last one, you have to get like swimming pools and about like seawater and how it gets acidic. Like you, that takes 4 hours only because after like the same 2 weeks we have some shows, we have one show and just like the same water.
That's in our logs. It's you.
No, you get deeper. And one of them is acidic. So we have acidic acid in our box. So we fill up one with water and one with acid. Yeah, I put a seashell in this. But it's supposed to like resemble how sport and fun is. And you have to put that one in 4 hours. Right in the chart.
Yeah.
That told you it's gonna be, and for Saturday. We're at, so we're gonna go
That means that it looked pretty,
it's happy, yeah.
pretty lengthy. It's never.
So, they said it looks nice.
That was wood. Start selling on.
Yeah.
I really don't. I really don't.
I don't know.
All right, so let's get back. What'd you guys find? Was that an interesting activity?
Yes.
You know, I always think that kids with significant disabilities that are not verbal, that they wouldn't go after the same things, but similar, right? I mean, the behaviors are different. Remember, right at the get-go, I said, some kids, the topography of the behavior is going to be the same, but the function is going to be different. The function of some behaviors are the same, but the topographies are going to be completely different. But they're similar, so we need to know what's things. So, let's task involvement. How were the kids involved in the tasks that they were asked to do? Not very well at all. Neither one of them, Jason or Michael. Now, what were some signs of agitation by Jason? I mean, Michael, the first one, the verbal one. Right, he kind of argued back and forth, right? And is arguing with somebody a sign of agitation? Yes, it is. Okay, so that's a sign of agitation. Now with Jason, his regurgitation, rolling his eyes, rolling his head, and not doing the work, that was kind of like arguing with the teacher, right? So that's a sign of agitation. How do you know when your friends are agitated? What are some things? What are some behaviors that you engage in when you start getting agitated?
Like you don't want to talk, so.
All right, so you might become quiet. Yeah, I'm not get agitated by doing more things. I do less things. So my kids know when I was agitated, I got real quiet. He said, and their mom said, stop bugging dad.
I get an attitude.
I'm sorry?
I get an attitude.
Say,
I get an attitude when I'm agitated.
yeah, your attitude is short, curt. Yeah, that's short, curt answers are a sign of agitation. Eyes darting or rolling are when you can say, I swear I can hear your eyes at the back of the room. You know, kids roll their eyes. That's a sign of agitation. Tapping a pencil, moving a leg, those are signs of agitation. They increase, they start increasing. Those are agitation. Talking slower or talking faster can be signs of agitation. Doing less work when you're throwing your hands up, sighing more, louder, that's signs of agitation. So there's some things, and we saw those. There was successive interactions between the teacher and the student. Do you think the teacher was actually making the things better or worse? Worse, right? I mean, because kind of pressuring the kids. Yeah, those successive things. They were doing teacher's turn, student's turn, teacher turn, student's turn. What happened if you stopped as a teacher and you didn't take a turn? And said, well, I told you what to do and you walked away. And that's all you did. Would the student try to engage you in that power struggle? There's no power struggle to engage in. And here's the thing about power struggles, guys. The kids are going to win every time. Because they think they have no reason not to go way off the reservation. That was probably inappropriate. They would go off the rails on that, and it's okay for them to do that. You can't go off on the rails with them, right? There you go. So, and then the presence of escalating behavior change. So there's interesting things. Now, here's some things in task involvement you need to ask yourself as a teacher. And think about Michael in this situation. Did Michael understand the directions? Not necessarily. Remember, he said, when did we have to do 10? Right? So rather than expecting him to carry over from the day before, what would you do as a teacher? Remind them of what the activity is. Remember, class, we've got this activity we're doing, and you have a visual of it on the board, right? So how easy is that? Say, remember, class, we have 10 math items we need to complete by the end of blah, blah, blah. That's all it takes. Just a reminder. What about, and then if they don't understand the directions, give them an opportunity to ask questions about the directions, right? Now then, here's another one. We need to make sure that whatever we're asking the student to do, they have the prerequisite skills to be able to do those things. Michael might not have been able to do the math problems. He might not have the foundational skills. And Jason might not be able to do the things we're asking him. So that's important. Also, was there a negative history with the previous task or activity with that student? So we already know Michael's not good at math. So we need to make it a positive event, not a negative event for him. That's important. And how many of you guys were in elementary school or in school and the teacher had you do 50 math problems that you say, why are we doing 50? I can show you that I know what I'm doing in 10, right? We have to do a whole stinking page. If they've already mastered it, why do they have to re-show you they mastered it? Does that make sense? So we need to know these things. We don't know this about Michael, but we need to know these things, correct? So that's important as a teacher when we get there. Signs of agitation. You need to know, what were Michael's signs of agitation? What was his body language telling you? Was he engaged or was he totally withdrawn? He's leaning back in his chair, legs all out, head facing down, in a surly mood, right? There you go. Look at their initial responses. If they're negative, then you need to try something different. And don't get involved in successive responses. Say, okay, get to work. Here's the work to do, get to work and walk away. And if they're not doing the work, do the broken record technique. broken record technique is you have work to do, you need to get your work, get your 10 items done, and walk away. That's it. That is the best thing that you can do. Next week, I'll bring in When the Chips Are Down, and we can watch When the Chips Are Down again. And some of you guys haven't seen that. It's a good video. I could probably pull it up tonight, but we're good. So that's signs of agitation are really important. Interactions, my turn, your turn. What happens if you didn't take a turn? What if you took a different turn? But both of these things show how the teacher actually increased the inappropriate behavior of the students by reinforcing them to get into that negative behavior set. So that's really important. So this is kind of how we see this. Questions argues the regurgitation, noncompliance, the resistance, verbal abuse, face slapping, defiance, confrontation, hair pulling, aggression, more regurgitation. See, that's kind of how we're seeing the similar stuff. So now then, this is something you can take and generalize to more kids as you move into your future. To know that all kids are going to go through things differently, and you just got to know the kid and how they demonstrate escalating change of behavior. Okay. So we're going to look at the phases of acting out behavior and when we can intervene. So we're going to start with number one. Number one is calm. That's where everybody's doing what they're expected to do. You're engaged in the activity. The students are engaged, producing the work, etc. Then, so these are the phases. In phase one, calm, this is what we should see, okay? Phase, and I get ahead of myself all the time. I slow down. This is a way that you proactive things to do in the prevention stage at phase one. So these are the things that you do. Classroom rules are very important. High expectations, routines, etc. Those are the things that you're doing. All right. So the summary of that is that the student is cooperative. Then phase two is a trigger. And there's something happened that caused the student to start escalating their behavior. And these are the things that you're starting to see when a student start to escalate their behavior. See, they might question and argue with you, and all the way to being off task. They might be starting to use threats and intimidation, etc. So that's phase two, a trigger, something's triggered. Phase two, there might see some of these things happening at school or at home. Prevention strategies are, again, very similar to what we saw with the first phase. We want to manage your instruction to get them back. If they're engaged, they won't have time to act out. Okay? So you want them back engaged. Routines are great for this. The next is agitation. So as they're triggered and they're starting to become more agitated, these are some things you might see. You might see increases in behavior and decreases in behavior. Does this all make sense so far? Very similar? Yeah. Managing the agitation phase, you might give the student space, give them choices. For example, I had students that were out of their seat and disrupting other kids. So I tell them, Billy, you need to either sit here and do your work or sit here doing your work. What choice are you going to make? And he says, well, I want to sit over there and do my work. I say, well, that's not a choice. Our choice was here or here. What choice are you going to make? Broken record technique. I want over there, here or here. What choice are you going to make? And then you walk away, make your choice, and you will turn and walk away, and then make the choice to engage or not. Okay? So that's important. Don't engage them in a power struggle, just give them a choice. They won't always take the choice. They might try to do the third option. No is always an option. So be prepared for that, but that's knowing your student. A lot of times what I'll do in this situation is a student starting to get aggravated. I have what's called my fake note technique. I'll say, Mrs. Smith, the school secretary needs this information from me. Can you be my delivery person and take it down to Mrs. Smith? And it gets them out of the room. By the time they get back, what do you think's happened? They're relaxed. You've worked this out with Mrs. Smith already, previously, but it's a technique to get them away from the situation, helps them calm down, gets them to have some activity and some movement, and then by the time they get back, they're ready to get back to work. So it's funny, this note would say, hey, Miss Smith, how you doing? And her note would come back, doing great, Mr. Cabot, how you doing? That kind of thing, you know? But it works. I had a student that we worked out a deal that when she started getting agitated, she could go out on the swing set outside, right outside the window, and swing for 15 minutes. That's a vestibular activity that helps calm you down, and it works great for her. And she was an aggressive child. So we would have that, she'd get triggered, she would raise her hand, say, I need to swing, and she would go out and swing, come back in, and be fine for the rest of the day. It's kind of interesting. You just find these things as you go on. It's not magic. It's just getting to know the kids. So these are some things that you can do to help the child engage better and manage their feeling anxious. Then if it doesn't work, then we're moving into the acceleration phase. And these are things, what you see in acceleration, you see more of the same, more arguing, more questioning, more noncompliance, more off task, provoking students, more of the same. I hate whining and crying kids. I didn't order any wine, and I have no cheese to go with it. So there you go. But that's more of the stuff to get there. To manage this, you limit your verbal instructions and commands. You pretty much, you give them direction by maybe tapping the table and saying, sit down, whatever it is, you're really, but you're going to provide them more space because they're if you walk up to them, they're going to become increased and more agitated. So you give them some space, and you need to be starting at this time thinking about what's the crisis plan for the classroom? How do I get extra help? Because every classroom will have a crisis plan for an out of control student. So you need to know this. The peak phase is where the student is blowing their top. And it could be that they go off in the classroom, they start doing some of these things, tearing things off the walls, those kind of stuff. How to manage the peak phase. This is when you practice this up prior to this situation, but you want to clear the room of all the other students. Sometimes just getting rid of the audience will help, but clear the room of all the other students. Kids that are out of control, you're not going to be able to take them out into the hallway. Clear the room of the calm students. And send one of the students down to get help. And that'll be a crisis situation that you've worked out already. Room clears are great. Gets the audience out, gets them out of there. Protect the kids is what you need to do. Usually after a student has had an explosion, they de-escalate. And their behavior goes from being this crazy, out of control behavior to being like a wet rag a lot of times. They've expended a ton of energy, etc., and that's a de-escalation phase. Now you don't want to cause them to go back into the escalated peak phase again, and it can easily happen. They can start to de-escalate, and then they go right back up to the peak phase. But there's some strategies to work with them on this. They're going to be a little confused. They're going to be withdrawn. They're going to say, I didn't mean to do that. Apologetic, those kind of things. Some kids have expended so much energy, they're going to fall asleep. What do you think you need to do? Are you going to try to wake them up? Let them sleep. Just leave them, let them be. Make sure that they're breathing, make sure that they're okay, let them sleep. These are things that you need to do is monitor for the health and safety of the student and of the staff. Provide easy, concrete tasks for the student to engage in, like putting together a small puzzle or something, just to get them to calm down. And then your recovery is when you debrief the situation where they're completely back at calm and able to work. You say, now, what do you think we could do next time to make so we don't have to get to this point, right? So that's important to think through. So we return to the calm phase. We assist the student to return to normal activities. Here's some things to avoid. This PowerPoint is going to be up. I'll put it on your content page tonight, later. Why do you think these are things we want to avoid when dealing with students in a crisis? Is it good to be in their face?
It's never gonna make things better.
How would you feel if somebody is yelling at you in their face or standing there in your face? If I'm mad, you better back up. I always stay a leg distance away. Why? Yeah, and I always stand I stand this way when I'm talking to him, a leg distance away. Because this is much better than anywhere else. So it's one of those things. Don't engage in power struggles, don't argue. If they're questioning, answer their questions. Be very calm. Don't let them see you sweat. You know what I mean? You got to be the calm one in the group. If they always joke about this, the goat, if they know where your goat's tied, they'll always go and get your goat, right? So that's back in the Army Navy days. The goat is the Navy's mascot, right? And in the Army Navy game, the Army would always go to steal the goat. So you mix them that. So you don't want to let them know when your goat's time. So they can't push your buttons, because they'll always get your goat. Don't this. Once you've touched the student and they're agitated, it's like giving them free rein to become aggressive. They will become aggressive. If you touch them first. I had a teacher I was working with that would throw erasers at kids, when we had chalkboards. He would throw erasers at kids that weren't paying attention. I said, yeah, that's aggressive. He says, no, it's not, it's just getting their attention. I said, no, that is a projectile, just like shooting a gun is a projectile. When you hit them, that's an aggressive behavior. And that could assault. That's assault. He finally quit throwing erasers. He retired eventually, but he got the message. So, interesting. Remain calm, keep your voice calm, talk softly. Move slowly and deliberately. Keep a leg's distance away from the student. Minimize your body language. Don't put your hands behind your back, because they're going, what do you got you behind your back? Why are your hands behind your back? That's what they're going to be thinking rather than trying to calm down. You want to keep your hands out, not in fists, palms facing forward, and a relaxed stance. That's really, you want to show them that you're in control. You're okay. Speak calmly, speak respectfully. I use a lot of Miss and Mr. in my classes, and said Mr. So-and-so or Miss So-and-so. Being respectful. I think that's an important thing, is to be respectful. If they engage and do something that you ask them to do, say, thank you very much for sitting down. If you ask them to sit down. And if everything escalates, you need to withdraw from the situation. So that's important. Some tips on defusing behaviors. Before the behavior really even gets there, pre-correct. Give them what behaviors they need to engage in. Utilize effective correction procedures. Manage off-task behavior. Kids will be more apt to be engage in inappropriate behavior if they're off task. Keep them on task in something. Manage the agitation, manage the threats, keep those things at a minimum, etc. Be that. I love that picture. Be the referee. Be the unless they're kicking dirt on your feet at home base. Right? Okay. When pre-correcting, if the student does a certain behavior all the time, teach them something new to do, an appropriate way to engage. That's important. Identify what context and what the typical behavior is and what's expected behavior, and reinforce for the expected behaviors. Give good, strong reinforcements. Prompt expected behaviors to say, how are we supposed to act in this class? What's our rules? Go back to the rules. And they say, okay, I was to do this, this, and this. Thank you very much. Good, John. Correction procedures. The goal is to interrupt the chain of behavior, not to increase it. You might get them engaged in a game activity at their table, rather than doing other things. But just get them engaged. Managing off-task behaviors, again, you gotta keep them motivated and on task. This is where you really need to manage your behavior in this, is that if they're questioning, you answer their questions, you be calm about it, give them options. It's the illusion of control, you know what I mean? If you have a forced choice response, you have a choice, but it's an illusion. You've got to do one or the other. So that's kind of an interesting thing. If they curse at you, don't curse at them back. If they call you names, don't call them names. Delay responding, count to 5. Avoid any escalating prompts. Don't get agitated. I worked in a psychiatric hospital for kids, and it was amazing. The kids were from inner city kids, and all they had to say to get the other kids riled up was say, "Your mama." Oh, they don't even know your mama. And all you say is your mama, and they're ready to fight. And hold on. So, taught them how to act. Don't feed that behavior. Just say whatever and walk away. But that was the funniest thing. All they had to do is say your mama. Okay. So you don't want to escalate them. So don't say your mama to the kids, guys. Okay. Identify the signs of agitation and utilize techniques to diffuse it. Establish limits, and that's important. Pre-teach these procedures, present choices, and follow through. Always follow through. And if they're at that point where they're exploded, you go get help. Okay. Each of your school systems, once you get into them, they'll have a whole process for this so that you'll be taught those skills. It's important that you take those to and learn them very well. It's really important. After the emergency, you want to restore the environment as quickly as possible and help them figure out how they're going to engage next time. Okay, that's really important. So, any questions? Does that make sense on all those pieces? It's good information. It's good. It's good for dealing with your friends and family too. You know. So. Short class today. Is that okay? All right. Next week, we will start getting into functional behavior assessments. I will have some activities that we'll work through, and I'll bring in the When the Chips Are Down video. We'll watch that too, because it's an excellent video. And
I think it'll be 2 weeks from now. We have Easter next week.
oh, is Easter next week? So Thursday night, we're gonna have class? Okay, 2 weeks from now. 2 weeks from now. I'm not gonna be, usually I'm pretty hard about this. But you guys eat lots of chocolate. And enjoy that. I found my favorite new chocolate is the Mocha Kit Kat.
Oh, that's good.
Oh, my God.
That's my coffee.
Look at that. Awesome. I'm done. Those are your skis. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. I'll see you guys next 2 weeks. 2 weeks.
bring you back your book.
Please.
Promise.